Well, Tansei, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Women in Leadership event. My name is Keith Willoughby. I am the Dean of the Edwards School of Business. I'm delighted to be your host for today's event and to welcome you with us here in this virtual platform. I acknowledge that today I am joining you, and many of us, I'm assuming, are joining us today from Treaty 6 territory, here in the province of Saskatchewan. That's an important acknowledgement for us to meaningfully acknowledge the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place. And I, as a non-Indigenous settler, I acknowledge my opportunity to learn more and appreciate more about how I can contribute to truth and reconciliation in this great country of ours. Wherever you may be joining today, across Canada, in whatever treaty territory you are from, I encourage you to pay that respect to those who've gone before in a good way. I want to acknowledge the wonderful assistance of Carly Snow, who is our Edwards School of Business Advancement Engagement Officer, who has handled superbly the logistics for today's event, which will be record-breaking for us in terms of our ability to connect with a vast number of Edwards School of Business faculty, staff, students, many alumni joining us today, business leaders in this province and elsewhere, university senior leaders as well joining us across campus in this virtual platform today. Well, everyone, today is Tuesday, March the 8th, and it marks International Women's Day. The theme for this year's International Women's Day in 2022 is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. I think that's a very poignant theme for us as we embark upon, we hope to be, a recovery from pandemic episodes that have impacted us quite substantially for the past 2 years. International Women's Day is an opportunity to celebrate the diverse and tremendous contributions of women, society, in business, in leadership, throughout their tremendous contributions. I'm not a woman of leadership. I'm a pale male dean, but I can testify to the impact of women's roles in leadership. Today, we have the privilege, and I say the wonderful privilege, of hearing from Jackie Cook. Jackie Cook, alumna of the Edwards School of Business, class of 2013, currently the Chief Operating Officer at Vendasta, at one of Canada's top 40 under 40. A superb and authentic recognition of her leadership, of her talent, her skills in her profession. Jackie, we welcome you today and are grateful that you've given of your time and talent to be able to help connect with Edwards School of Business faculty, staff, and students, and our broader community joining us for today's event. We came to hear from you. So without any further ado, Jackie, I'll turn the time over to you to deliver your presentation. We will have opportunity for questions and comments from the many, many folks who are joining us today. And go to you, Jackie. Welcome to the Edwards School of Business 2022 Women in Leadership event.
Thank you, Dean Willoughby. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and maybe if I could get someone to give me a quick thumbs up. Awesome. All right, you can see it there. Thank you for the great introduction. I'm very excited to be presenting today. Any participation that I can have with the University of Saskatchewan. My heart still resides and will always reside here in Saskatchewan, and we do produce some incredible things for our world. So be proud of where you're from. I'm Jackie. I'm the COO here at Vendasta, as Dean Willoughby mentioned. Vendasta is a software company based right here in Saskatoon in Silicon Prairie. Our mission is to be the leading platform for companies who provide digital solutions to small and medium-sized businesses. Not a lot of people know what Vendasta is, so I'm just going to hit it right off. We are here to democratize technology to allow SMEs to compete with the big guys. The world runs on small businesses. Worldwide, small businesses make up more than 90% of the businesses and make up more than 50% of all employment. We know that when we help a business, we're not only helping that business, we're building the communities in which we all live. And a strong local economy is needed now more than ever. So that's our mission. In the 8 years I've been with the company, so a couple years since I graduated from Edwards, we've grown from about 50 folks in Saskatoon to over 650 people around the world. We're an international company, as we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, with Vendastians located in the US, in India. We've got an office in Spain, Brazil, the UK, and some folks in the Netherlands as well. And we've recently made 2 acquisitions, and our goal is to build a lasting technology company, jobs and truly an ecosystem right here in the heart of Silicon Prairie. That's the reason why Vendastians wake up and come to work every day. We believe in local, and we believe our contribution makes the world a better place to live. But that's not the reason I'm talking to you today. We can talk about Vendasta anytime. DM me on LinkedIn, reach out to pretty much any Vendastian, and they'll talk to you about what we're doing. But today is International Women's Day, a global holiday to commemorate the cultural, political, and socioeconomic achievements of women. And when Megan at the Edwards School of Business reached out to ask me if I would speak, truth be told, I struggled a little bit to think about what I would talk about. What kind of inspiring message could I bring the students and alumni? Had she asked me to speak about organizational design or business strategy, unit economics, or operational excellence in a high-growth SaaS company, could have bored you for days. But something as important as this doesn't really roll off the tongue. So despite having been thinking about this for months, I did what I do with every major task that's hard for me to do. I left it to the last responsible minute, which was last night after the kids were in bed. I had a whole presentation, in fact, created prior to this, but I scrapped it all. So when I pulled a couple of people and asked what I should talk about, they said, just tell your story. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to tell you my story. I'll touch on some lessons I've learned along the way. And then I'll leave you with just some thoughts on International Women's Day. But there's a bit of a twist. I've had an item on my to-do list for over a year now, a year and 3 weeks to be exact. And that's been to write down the story of when my son was born. And like any mom, we are good multitaskers. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. So I'm going to tell you my story by telling him our story. Just indulge me for a little bit. It was a late night idea, and we're going to roll with it. So here goes. Dear Weston, where to begin? Well, let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm Jackie. I'm your mom. I grew up in Saskatoon. I attended the University of Saskatchewan. I played Husky soccer for a year and attended ESB. I was a part-time student and a full-time wanderer back in the day. I dropped out a few times, once to travel the world and be a backpacking hippie, and a few times to start some startups. And the dean at the time, not Dean Willoughby, don't worry, they had to actually sit me down and remind me that I only had 10 years to get through school before my classes would start to become expired and invalid. Talk about a stern talking to, but university was an incredible experience. I was fortunate to represent Canada at the G8 and G20 Summits in Toronto, as well as the APEC Summit in Japan. I was also fortunate to meet your dad. We were both tech geeks and still are today, and we participated in an accelerator in Toronto before moving back home. We're both passionate about solving problems with technology, and we found great purpose in work. But a few years ago, we found an even greater purpose, and that was when your brother entered the scene. He came fast and furious into the world about 3.5 years ago, and he turned that world upside down for us. Jackie, the tech exec, began to discover Jackie, the mom. We had a lot in common. We were both driven. We were both passionate. Jackie, the tech exec, was passionate about doing something that was never been done before in the tech scene. And Jackie, the mom, was passionate about, well, your sweet brother, and showing him this incredible world he'd just entered. And one of the toughest lessons Jackie had to learn was that I could be both of those Jackies, but not at the same time. If I was working at home, I wasn't present as a mom. If I was balancing the demands of life, I wasn't bringing my full self to work. I had to face the reality that despite being told we can have it all and be it all, the reality is we can't be a full-time mom and a full-time employee and a full-time wife and a full-time friend and a full-time sister, daughter, etc. I learned how to give myself grace, and I learned how to be in control of where I spent my time, because time is really all we have. I learned, and am still learning, that my no's protect my yeses. At the time your brother was born, Vendasta had really just started its rocket ship ride. In order to make room for Jackie the mother, I had to change my approach to leadership. Whereas I was used to rolling up my sleeves and out hustling everyone else, I needed to learn different skills, how to attract and retain incredible talent, how to give them the context and the resources to do their jobs effectively, how to learn on things like metrics and key performance indicators and data to develop strategy and decision-making. And in some areas, I had to learn how to let go control. In some areas, I was taking the sunlight away from others. But the cool thing was when I stepped back, strong, beautiful new trees grew in my place. Fast forward 2 years, your brother grew from a brand new babe to a busy little boy. We knew we wanted to grow our family. In fact, when I came back from my first mat leave, I told Brendan, our CEO at the time, Brendan, this is my 2-year notice. Not that I was going anywhere, but I wanted to spend my time at home with you as baby number 2. As we got closer to your arrival, I prepared my whole mat leave transition plan. 2 people would step into my place, one taking on my operational duties and the other on my general manager duties, and for the interim position while I was quote unquote lights out for a whole year at home with you 2. I presented our plan, my whole plan, to our board of directors, got it approved. We were gearing up and we marched toward your due date. Your dad and I put an offer in on our house and we prepared to move in 2 weeks before you were born. But something happened in the year you were baking in my tummy. The rise in COVID cases caused a shift in small business technology adoption. Doors were closed, so businesses needed to find new ways to attract and serve customers. Up and to the right, COVID cases. Similarly, up and to the right, technology adoption. E-commerce adoption was at about 17%. And in the 8 weeks following COVID shutdowns, it grew to over 27%. Vendasta was truly fortunate to be at the right place at the right time of this shift. And the markets reacted. All of a sudden, there was a huge demand for mid-tier technology companies in Canada. There was this like gap in the landscape. At Vendasta, we contemplated a fundraise to go faster and take advantage of the market opportunity. But an IPO seemed like way far off at the stage we were at. We were still a mid-tier company. Right around Christmas time, the day before Christmas Eve, in fact, we decided with our board of directors to pursue an IPO as it would give us the most optionality. We could pursue venture capital or private equity to fuel our growth, but preparing to be a public company would be a great exercise in testing our operational procedures, our governance structure, and our management, regardless of which path we chose. Now, I have to tell you, this is one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. The board, to be clear, our board of directors and my team members on the exec team supported my decision to stay at home and enjoy mat leave. That was still plan A, and we were going with plan A. I'd worked so hard over the past couple of years, the last 10 years really, just to be able to be the mom when I came time. But while my team would miss me, they assured me they could carry on without me. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that I had to be a part of something as transformational to Vendasta and as transformational to Saskatchewan really as an initial private offering. Or an initial public offering. I committed to staying on during the IPO process, a 3-month accelerated roller coaster ride. And naturally, the heat of it would take place right around your due date. If there's anything harder than stopping a speeding train, it's an IPO process and a baby's due date. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. We had just wrapped up a board meeting and I had a big presentation to make. It was almost if you knew we needed you to stay in there until this was done. As just a couple hours later, contractions started. You were born the very next morning at 7:23. The most amazing birth experience. You came into this world so peacefully. The first marker of your sweet, sweet demeanor. Right from the get-go, you've been such a ray of sunshine in our lives. In the days following, we settled into life as a family of 4. Your dad was also going through a transaction with his company at the time. So on top of moving into our new house, going through an IPO with a brand new baby, we were both working around the clock. late nights though to get the work done so that we could be present with you and your brother during your waking hours. Luckily, investment bankers don't work banking hours. So a lot of our calls took place at night after you guys were in bed. February 22nd, 2021, 10 days after you were born, we were gearing up to start our first presentation on our virtual IPO roadshow. Thanks to COVID, I was able to participate right from home instead of flying around North America to meet with retail and institutional fund managers. Something I never would have been able to participate in had it not been for this pandemic. We'd spent the entire weekend practicing our pitch, Brendan, Richard, and I, and our small team behind us, refining the scripts, ensuring all the content and figures mapped back to the draft prospectus. I'd also practiced pumping and trying to read your hunger cues in the case I needed to go off camera and fill your pea-sized tummy. 8 hours of back-to-back meetings for about 10 days straight, except for a lunch break to fuel up, adjust the script, and where we needed to pump. And if we were lucky, if there were no questions or discussion that ran over, we had about 10 minutes in between meetings to go get a coffee, change a diaper, et cetera, et cetera. But there were always questions, and the discussions always ran into the next group of investors, which hindsight was a really great sign. How many hours of sleep did I get last night? Doesn't matter. Should we tell the bankers and fund managers that there's a newborn on my lap? Or should we just pray that you stay asleep during the pitch? I was so grateful for those with kids and those with compassion when you did fuss, but you were an absolute angel. You barely fussed at all. Day one, meeting number 3, total blowout. Sorry for everyone watching, a little bit visual, but for those of you who have changed a diaper, it's gonna be okay. 5 minutes to sprint, change your diaper, and be back in time for showtime. Luckily, Brian, one of my colleagues and friends, was my stunt double on standby. He had my script memorized and I view at all times. He was our coach, our stage mom, and this was the first blowout, but definitely not the last. Thankfully, we found our groove after a few days. What started as a $100 million fundraise through public offering resulted in an oversubscribed $120 million private investment led by 2 brilliant new investors, and followed on by our existing investor base. Truly a remarkable experience in the technology ecosystem in Saskatchewan. The past year has been a trip, to say the least. I'm incredibly thankful for the experience, but most of all, I'm grateful for my little sundog baby and all the time on leave I got to spend with you after the close. So, Westie boy, I want to leave you with some tips for when you grow up. Okay, there's going to be this thing. It's called imposter syndrome. It hits all of us, but I think it might hit and affect women a little more. You have to understand this. It's basically where you totally doubt your abilities, and as a result, you feel like a total fraud. It's very real. And it'll sneak up on you right when you're about to give a presentation to a ton of people on Zoom, or really at any time. You can try convincing yourself that you deserve to be there. You can rely on your friends and family to be your little pep squad as a gut check. But for me personally, there's really only been one way to remedy this, one piece of advice to get you through it. And that is to hustle. Work hard, kid. If there's anything I learned in sports, it was that in general, there was a pretty close correlation between working hard and doing well. It's not rocket science or wizardry. When asked what a secret formula for success is, people don't usually like this answer. It's hard work. I heard some great career advice from a fellow top 40 under 40 award honoree recently, and I'd like to share it with you today, Weston. Don't shy away from hard work. Say yes to as many opportunities as possible, especially early in your career. Use those opportunities to ambitiously build your experience, hone your skills, and stretch yourself out of your comfort zone. Don't view this as overtime, but as additional years on your resume. Keep that in mind when you go to university, because that's the time. My goal has and always been to hustle hard when I was younger to afford the time now, knowing that you and your brother would completely turn my worlds upside down just like you have. Okay. Next one, Work-life balance. Yeah, I would love anyone else's advice on this, but here's what I've found. Work-life balance, at least for me, is kind of like toddler meals. Someone told me once that you're not supposed to measure your toddler meals in terms of one meal or even a day. You got to look at the snapshot of the week. They might eat like a whole cow one meal, and then they might not eat anything. And I think that's kind of what work-life balance is for me. It's not measured in days or in hours. Sometimes it means picking you up or your brother up early from school on a Friday to spend extra time when things get late or carry into the weekends. And to be honest, if I'm going to call it what it is, I cheated on this one a little bit. Your grandparents were and have been total lifesavers since the day you were born. Since the day I was born, if you want to get technical. But your Lala was like my clone during those early days during the IPO, and your grandpa steals you away every chance you get. We are so privileged to have family support, and we recognize not everyone is lucky to have this kind of support in their lives. So be patient and be compassionate with people who don't have this support. All right, last one. Gender equality. Well, I'm honestly looking to you for this one, and I want your advice. But here's what I've been thinking a lot about. This year is really about squashing biases. Something that I've learned in our journey together, especially this last year, is how transformative something like having kids is and what a role this plays in our greater society, to be honest. It took me a whole year to get over this guilt and talk about this journey, and probably a presentation for the university group maybe kickstarted it. But for every working parent we celebrate, let's celebrate the parents on leave as well. These beautiful babies don't raise themselves, and without normalizing one, we'll never normalize the other. And this is not just about getting women back to work. It's about celebrating the role of women in society, recognizing the strengths in feminism. It's also about recognizing the role of dads and other parents and caregivers at home, realizing the importance of caregiving. Giving care to dependents in our society is a sacred role of critical importance. So, today is International Women's Day. While you were forced to listen to my story today, I challenge you to discover the stories of so many others who face much greater adversity than I've ever experienced. Those carrying an unfair load. This is an image that's actually in my office. Or those creating homes in a foreign place. Or those battling with reconciliation right here at home and the unfair burden they carry. These women is who International Women's Day is for. Not tech execs, but everyday women who build our societies. So with that, dear Weston, I hope by the time you get your first job, we're not even talking about International Women's Day anymore. We found room for equality in the other 364 days as well. I hope we found a way to break the biases, whether deliberate or unconscious, biases around working women and stay-at-home partners, biases in the workplace and in our communities. I hope we found a way to come together and build the world we deserve. A world free of biases, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And a world where difference is valued and celebrated. So with that, I want to say thank you for listening to me today and for sharing my story. And I think we've got a little Q&A.
We do, Jackie. Thank you very much. Applause thunderously in this virtual platform, to be sure. Attendees, this is your opportunity here. Carly, my co-pilot, is going to help navigate the chat, but this is an opportunity for you to spend some time gaining valuable advice, experience from somebody who's truly been there, done that.
Come on, there's got to be one question. Pam Bristol, all right. Is that the first question, or do we have, I think someone emailed some too. Which ones do you want to?
I'll go to you, Carly. You want to navigate that chat? I think I see a question from Pam. It's what's next for Vendasta?
Oh, geez, wow. Hey, just putting our heads down and doing what we're here to do, which is help businesses adopt technology. We've got, I mean, since the private round, we've made 2 acquisitions, and we're just in the process of integrating some fantastic folks into our company right now, and bringing their technology to our customers right now as well, like technically integrating, and then of course from a cultural and people perspective, integrating those 2 companies. And yeah, we're just launching in South Africa in a big way right now as well. So that looking at globalization on the horizon in the next couple of years.
So Jackie, how did the organization pick those specific locations for their global ops?
So 2 ways. One is through M&A, which companies fit our acquisition framework. Vendasta is sort of like a 3-sided marketplace. So we call it our flywheel, our vendors. We're a white label platform, so that's why nobody has ever heard of Vendasta or doesn't know we exist, because our partners put their branding on it and bring it out to their clients. But one of our major customers is they're a big telco, they're the largest telco in South Africa. And so they're bringing us there. And of course, to have people there to support them is one kind of hiring strategy. And the other one is the technology platforms and the companies that fit within our M&A framework brings the talent as well. And so that's where we got sort of our office in Toronto and LA as well.
Okay, thank you. Carly, I see the chat here, so you don't mind, I can read through some of these questions here. I apologize, attendees, if I mispronounce the name, but from Adrienne. What was something, Jackie, you believed about being a parent that you learned was not true when you became one?
Oh man, where to begin? One of the things that like people would talk about that just didn't really ever hit me was like, oh, you have free time now, just wait. And I was like, oh yeah, like how can it be? What do you mean? Like, when do people have time now for really any, like I commend the parents who are like, I don't know, still have hobbies.
Sort of froze on the last part, Jackie. Wonder if you can hear me now? You have to have Jackie come in and re-enter.
Yeah, she might have to. Let's see what I can do.
Okay, and I am queuing up the questions here, so thank you, attendees, for submitting some fantastic myriad of questions. So Jackie, if you can hear me, looks like your video is frozen on your end, so if you just want to reboot, and we'll get you back in. Hi, Jackie.
Sorry, I'm back. Just, I think I dropped out there for a sec.
No worries. Well, thank you. We've got several questions lining up right now, so I'll get to this one here. This is from Nicole Denbo, one of my colleagues here in the business school. What would be your advice for women in business struggling with the imposter syndrome?
I kind of, I mean, hit it a little bit. And it's not a popular answer, to be honest, but the way that I got over it, and this was, I would say, honestly, pre-kids. I know my talk is a lot about kids. It's been transformative in my personal journey, but I know it's not part of everyone's journey. But before I had kids, it was really just, if I could convince myself that I worked harder than anyone, then I could convince myself that I deserve to be there just as much as everyone. And I think those two go hand in hand. I think there's a lot of like messaging, especially, I don't know if it's the university demographic, that like take time off and don't work hard and YOLO and stuff. It's like, you can't really have both. Like if you want to do things and see success, you kind of have to work hard. And I think there's just an old fashioned rolling up your sleeves and getting it done that we have to kind of turn back to. So the other thing I would say is like surround yourself with a group of people that you trust deeply and that can be radically candid. A lot of times when I'm think I'm totally out to lunch, whether it's my husband or my group of besties, I'm just like, hey, am I thinking about this right? And usually they'll find a way to pump me up and beat the imposter out of me, kind of thing, so I can go on my merry way.
That notion of that work ethic, Jackie, is it something you think you were born with, or is it something that you've had to learn to acquire? You mentioned that quite proudly in your response, as well as in your presentation, about working harder and hustling to overcome the imposter syndrome. Where did that ethic gene come from? The work ethic.
I don't probably my parents, like when it comes back to it, but I think a lot of it came from sports. It's like if sports is just a simulation of reality a lot of the time, right? And if there's so many parallels in between, and it's not just sports, it could be hobbies or anything, but generally there's a correlation. Generally, there's definitely the outliers, but between those that put in time and effort and those that do well. And it's like I'm not inventing anything here. It's so I think just recognizing that there's no real easy paths in life. Anything that's easy isn't really worth it. Anything that takes time and is hard to attain is worth it in the end.
Almost like your version of sweat equity, so to speak, in terms of the ability to work harder and have that effort. Nadine asked the question, Jackie, are you doing any traveling now as a professional? And if so, how do you navigate that with children and husband?
Great question. Totally trying to figure that out right now, Nadine. So with my first son, he was on a plane like every 3 weeks. We were like, we would go to an executive offsite. He'd come along, and it was kind of cool actually. We're all here, and I'm with a baby at these offsites. He traveled quite a bit. 2 babies is like hard, and it's not really the baby, it's the toddler that's tough to lug around. So my travel has definitely slowed down. I was actually supposed to be in San Francisco today for a conference and speaking, and my husband called dibs first, and we're not quite at the place where I'm comfortable leaving both boys yet. My son's got a bit of an allergy, so I just gracefully said, I can't do it this time. And the whole world didn't shut down, and it was okay. And my team member went instead, and he's doing a bang up job in presenting what I was supposed to help him present. So yeah, learning how to say, I guess.
Do you have a favorite location, Jackie, where you've traveled as a business professional, a favorite place around the world?
I mean, I love New York. San Francisco is cool, but I love New York. I think what's cool about New York is that they've got so many subcultures in the various neighborhoods, and you can go 2 blocks over and be in a whole different city. It's busy though. If that's for work, for vacation, I get the heck out of cities. Like I'm in the mountains and away from cell service. New York would probably be my top.
Here's a very insightful question from Emily, especially relevant for today being International Women's Day. Jackie, do you find that you're still having to break barriers in the workplace because you're a woman?
Yeah, but way less than I used to. I mean, there were times where, and you read about it all over in people's blogs, but I'd walk into a room and they'd sort of look at you like you were there to like take notes or coffee order, or like why are you here? Why are you sticking around? And then I had to definitely prove myself. And it took work and time, and be it investors or clients or even, not really my team members, but it wasn't a default deserve. It was a prove to me you deserve to be here. Something's tipped in the last couple of years though. And I think in general, we're moving in the right direction, but I think it's as much about what I've learned is it's as much about how you carry yourself walking into some of those rooms as well. I know that sounds, and you still got this imposter on your shoulder saying like slouch and hide away from your laptop. It's, if you walk in with a little bit of presence, and then sometimes you kind of have to fake your swagger to set the tone that you deserve to be there.
You mentioned about your ability to prove yourself, and if I could just pivot for a second here on maybe an extension to that question. You showed in your
Yeah.
presentation the shot of you with, I think, Prime Minister Harper and other youth leaders around the globe. That, I think, was the first time I remember meeting you. I think that picture may have been featured in Thrive or one of our Edwards social media pictures or platforms. So even though you had the tremendous success as a young professional, fresh out of your, and even during your university years, you still felt you need to try to prove yourself. So I guess, to what extent did your experiences as a student and the accolades you received, that must have provided you with some opportunity and a confidence as you went into your post-university career?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely. I think if you like to pump yourself up, okay, if I can do this, I can do this, and I can, it's like you keep shutting down that imposter so that you have that confidence. But at the same time, nobody like reads your bio when you walk into a meeting. You can't assume that they like, oh, you've met Obama, cool. All we have is the here and the now. And I think generally, if there were little things, like, to get tactical, there were little things I did early on, especially when I was like a younger pipsqueak in some of these meetings. Often what I would do to get heard is I would have a meeting before the meeting. So I started to pick up on, and this is a very real thing for International Women's Day, I have a high voice. A lot of women have higher voices. My voice doesn't carry. When we're in a boardroom with a lot of like male deep booming voices, I couldn't just like, because then I would 4 octaves higher, nobody would listen to me, right? So I would start to plant seeds and really get feedback on, like, I think this is the way I'm seeing it, and I've got data to show, and I've talked to these data and customers. Like, you want to get a point across, it's data or customers, qualitative or quantitative. And so I would often like have a meeting before the meeting, A, to see if I was totally out to lunch, or B, to try to get people to see my viewpoint in a closed session, so that when the meeting time came, they were the ones advocating. And a lot of what that meant was me giving up credit for potentially an idea, but you just got to trust. And as it did, and if you work with great humble team members, it started to come back that, like, no, that was Jackie's, but it's a really good point, we need to consider it. So it wasn't about like, this is my idea and I want to covet it until I'm in the boardroom and just gonna that just didn't work. I had to find a different approach. And I think communication, nonverbal communication, but also communication, is a really important strength for people to learn in a leadership position.
Well, thank you, Jackie. Here's a great question from Lorraine. I remember she's probably commenting on the picture that was shown during your presentation, where COVID allowed you to do your IPO presentation from home. Now, if we would have been in a pre-COVID environment, how would you have navigated the IPO process in, I guess, more normal circumstances?
Can you hear me now? I think I just.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Something's going on. Someone's stealing my internet here. I see Lorraine's question set out for a little bit, but truth be told, I have no idea. I have no idea. I think the answer would be I couldn't. Like, you can't just like, if everyone's in person, I don't think I could have just been patched. Like an IPO roadshow, from what I've never been on one before, but it is like, you wake up, one morning you're in London, the next morning you're in New York, the next morning you're in, depending on if you're taking, US based or global investors, or sticking with the Canadian base. It's not like you couldn't have a newborn on that. It would be very difficult, very, very difficult. I got to basically like roll out of bed, shower, try to manage the kid, and then show up for these meetings. So it was like serendipitous how it all worked out. It's interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to say, it's interesting now, and just touching base with some of the bankers, like, will they ever return to a post or a pre-COVID world of roadshow? There's a ton of cost and energy and effort in coordinating like those schedules. And I think a lot of what they discovered was like, you don't really have to, you can get the same result. So it'll be interesting to see if even they return to a pre-COVID world.
Yeah, never waste a good crisis. So maybe there's some learnings that have enabled us here to do things differently as we go on. There again, I'll continue to go through the questions, but I just wanted to highlight a comment here from Lynn. And this actually, I saw many comments as well, thanking you, Jackie, but just, you shared your experience and success, but from your heart, you shared your experience as a mom as well. And I think that's really insightful for Lynn to point that out. Nadine says, women as CEOs, how do you maintain your CEO, your position with grace and not morph into the old boys club to fit in, such as when healthcare, which is changing, but still is a bit old school. So how do you fit in being at the C-suite in the organization without being without being part of the old boys club, so to speak?
Yeah, I think part of it, like, it's funny because we had Monday morning, we talked about International Women's Day coming up and, the old boys club. And we were just sort of like, who here is the old, like, stand up. Are you the old boys? Like, but there definitely is a perception of the old. I'm happy to say that most, like my direct reports, so I have all the line divisions and it's 50-50, 2 male leaders, general managers, and two female. And the females are, by and large, they're younger, but we, in our industry, we haven't had the necessarily sort of the tenure of women in tech for as long. And these two, like, bust their butts and they deserve to be there. And I think there's less now. What I'm noticing in technology is there's a lot of like systems thinking and operationally understanding what operational excellence looks like from a very sort of quantitative. It's less about the softer skills and the intangibles, and there's more like data-driven leadership. Like I can see very clearly who's doing very well and what the commonalities is. And I think where we thought before leaders were always, drivers and competitive extroverts, what I'm noticing is that there's a huge place for introverts in leadership, and it is not recognized. And I'm not talking male, female. I'm talking introverts versus extroverts in different leadership and management styles as well. And so that's something that I've noticed as we recognize the strengths of different leaders and what the definition of a good leader is. It's shifting, and I think along with that, sometimes gender roles are shifting as a result of that.
Interesting you mentioned that here. And again, I know Lee Swanson is on the presentation today, as well as Brooke Clausen. So there's a few of my colleagues here who probably who definitely know more about this area than I do. But remember years ago, reading a study that mentioned the characteristics of effective executives. Mm-hmm. And it mentioned that this whole notion of charisma actually found to be like this, almost like a negative correlation. Again, I'm probably butchering the study, but what it said is that if an individual leads out with such charisma, the organization becomes about themselves. And when they leave, there's such a vacuum created. What they were saying is that the person who's the introvert has definitely a role to play in the organization. So don't feel that you need to be walking on water and creating a laser light show to be seen as an effective leader in the environment.
Totally. And that's, I think, if I call out these two leaders, like, sometimes you got to speak up and take credit for more of the things. And they're sort of just like, why? You can see how well we're doing. Why do I need to start taking credit for it? Like, it's very odd, and they're just very, and something that a couple of years ago, our last live conference, we had Conquer Local Vendasta down in San Diego. And we had, I know he's not a very popular guy, but we had Kevin O'Leary come talk. And I was actually floored at how much he talked about, like most of his team is women, and he started to dive into like why. I was like, why is that? Like, why do you actually like stereotype and hire women? He said, well, generally what we found across all of our portfolio companies is that the ones that are led by women, they set accurate and realistic forecasts and targets, and they overachieve. And that hit and lift is actually a formula in public markets. Hit and lift, and your analyst expectations and your stock valuation as a result goes up. But effectively what he was describing was the fact that there's so much positive momentum in organizations when people feel like they're winning. And unless you have people who are willing to say, no, we're only going to get here, but I know with great certainty that we're going to get here, and then they land there, it's a different style. And he said that had a very strong correlation with females in doing that.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because Jill has this question here about any particular opportunities for women that Vendasta has introduced into their system that you think would be beneficial for other businesses.
Oh man, we in our systems has Vendasta introduced. There's a lot of sub communities. So the crazy thing that's happened with Vendasta over the past couple of years is it went from like, again, 50 folks, like we were all knew each other's names and our spouses and kids, to now we're like bigger. And so to have one big community has kind of resulted in all of these different sub communities. And so in each one of these subcult, like we've got Mom Dasta, which we're there and we're supporting each other. And there's Pet Dasta too, for people who, you know, have fur children. And inside of what, in terms of gender equality and what we're doing, is a lot of management training around biases and unconscious biases as well, and creating very structured promotion processes, looking at, you know, people's skills and their individual development plans, recognizing even our interviewing frameworks when we, like, you can't have all male interviewers for a role. You have to show in the interviewee's eyes that this is a company with diversity that I want to be a part of. And then, of course, yeah, we look at data around gender, but also cultural diversity across the company as well. We've got a huge International Women's Day. And even some of the softer things, like what we've noticed, and I don't want to make it about gender, but some people, they value different things in terms of benefits and perks, flexible work schedule, maybe employee benefits. Childcare is something we're looking at right now as an organization as well. Scheduling meetings not at daycare pickup times it's a thing. Like, it's a real thing. Like, don't make the meeting at the time when I'm gonna have to drop, like I have to choose, and that's just not a fair thing. So just very subtle things. I don't think there's one hammer that changes the pendulum. I think it's recognizing all of the little things that equate to a more balanced workplace.
I'd say subtle but very powerful in terms of the ability to provide that lens that you're providing on. I think that's an excellent response. Just by the way, you might have mentioned this in the presentation. How many employees work at Vendasta here in Saskatoon?
I should have got these numbers right before. I think it's around 480, and then the balance is between our India office, which is I think 150-ish, and then the 70 folks now, and we've got folks all over, but those are the big.
Okay, so nearly 500 based here in Saskatoon.
Yeah, it's like 470, 480. Yeah.
Jennifer asked the question: would you do anything differently? Any regrets?
Oh man, yeah. If you want to open up that can of worms, Jennifer. I mean, no. Like, at the end of the day, I'm very lucky. You heard it, like my voice cracking the whole time, on the brink of like busting out in tears. But I did, by the way, pull a 180 on this presentation last night and today. So thank you for being patient. But no, I think not so much what I wish I would have done, but what I'm keen to start paying attention to and doing in the future is, like, the next 10 years. Yes, Vendasta is going to continue to grow. We just put together our 10-year plan, which sounds bonkers, but I want to start looking at how the role we're playing right here in our community, and just in general with women. I think there's just been the presentation I was going to give was like, these are the 10 women that shaped my life and why. And I think if I could be one of those 10 for a lot of people, it would be pretty cool. So maybe that's not a regret. Totally pivoted your question into where I'm going next, but
no,
yeah, something like that.
Okay. Continuing on with that, here's a great question from Jennifer about how do you balance the mom guilt?
You don't, like, it's a thing. Everyone warned me about this thing called mom guilt, and I was like, wow, it's just guilt. No, it's a different kind of guilt. It is right to your core kind of guilt. And I mean, you can never get rid of it for sure, but it's one of the things that I do is I put my phone down when I get home. That's like between 5 and 8, lights out. You can't really text me. Don't go. I've stopped, really, which was really hard, but stopped Instagram. That was a place that was like sucking my time right before bed, which is like, well, then you wake up and you're tired and stuff. Yeah. So just like being radically in control of where you spend your time is it's a forcing function. Like I will schedule my weekends and it'll be like Wonder Hub. And whether or not we go, I know that time is either we're playing mini sticks in the basement or we're doing something. But I think before I was sort of held hostage and a victim of my time. I'm like, well, I'm getting pulled here, and then we're doing this social event, and now I'm like, no, I'm the one that sets time in my calendar, and because of that, I prioritize dedicated time with my family and my kids, and I'm not two places at once. I'm not on Slack or on email. I'm fully present, and that's really the only way I'm combating mom guilt right now.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase, again, this probably existed before the pandemic, but I remember reading about it about 2 years ago, being actively present.
Yeah.
And not trying to, again, have my, my brain cells focus someplace, but my attention is elsewhere.
Yeah.
I remember, here's a question from Allison, who I remember from her days in the business school, mentioning that, Jackie, you've been a role model of hers. Allison's mentioning the LinkedIn article that mentioned the new feature to normalize career breaks to reduce any stigma around mat leaves or taking other leaves. So what else do you think businesses or social media could do to really normalize taking career breaks?
Is this Allie Bruce? Is in the
It is.
Allie Bruce? Oh my gosh. Led in our presence. Yeah, leaves is definitely, and so sorry, I know the question was what else. I think some of it has to do with leaders taking leads. Like I think that's, and I know that's hard to do, but if we're at a place, if the IPO taught me anything, it's that basically what we did was Brendan, our CEO, Richard, myself, our VP of Corp, like we took a big part of our management team out of the business for basically 4 months. And we're like, okay, everyone trains running on time and stuff. And it tested a lot of systems. It tested us as leaders to say, did we have the proper team in place? Did we have basically a number two redundancy in our roles? And did we have proper processes and systems in place to let the organization operate without us? And I think you don't need to do an IPO to do that, but something like a leave tests that. And if your team is a single point of failure, your organization, is at risk and isn't operating potentially as efficiently as it could be. So I think a leave is another way to kind of manufacture, simulate what we did with the IPO, which is like step away for a bit and see if the whole thing comes down. And if you do, and if it does, you're a level 4 leader, not a level 5 leader, because level 5 leaders have built proper teams and processes around them to ensure the organization remains. So I think a lot of what that is not just people at the front lines in the organization, but I think it's about leaders taking breaks as well and saying that it's okay to do so.
It's almost analogous, Jackie. You were mentioning your career with University of Saskatchewan Huskies playing soccer. Like soccer teams take break at halftime. Like you don't play constantly for the entire minutes. There's a chance to break, regroup, decompress. So probably that an analogy in sports would work similarly as well.
Yeah, and I would say it's because you can't really stop the game. That's the tricky thing, is that it's almost like taking your front line, your two best strikers, your starting goalie off, and making sure that the team around it can continue to function and whatnot. So it's a good exercise, I think, for organizations to do. In addition to what it provides, it's that.
To show you, Jackie, the reach of today's presentation, I think this is one of the first times I've ever seen a question from a parent of a soon-to-be Edwards entrepreneur whose daughter is coming to University of Saskatchewan next year. And Marnie says, what advice would you give to a young lady that knows everything, but her mom can't tell her, but you as a professional could? So what advice would you give to an upcoming entrepreneur here at the University of Saskatchewan?
Oh, man. There's so much in university that you don't realize how fortunate you are to have it until it's gone. You are basically, when you leave university, you start your track in some direction, and the further you go, it's not impossible, but you're building a foundation after university, right? You want to kind of develop an expertise around something, and create depth in your career. University allows you to create breadth in your experience before you need to create depth in your career. And it's kind of hard to do that after university, because sometimes, unfortunately, what people are looking for is expertise in the workforce. And jumping around and trying a whole bunch of different jobs on a resume isn't always the best sign to an employer. And so I would say take advantage of, I don't know where it came from, but the word collisions, like all of these accidental collisions that happen in, like, yes, join a club, jump on a group project with different people you wouldn't normally work with, like put yourself in so many different scenarios that you wouldn't otherwise be, because after it's gone, it's going to be hard to fabricate that experience again. You have so much cross-pollination of industry, opportunity, diversity of people, of culture, of experience. It's just a beautiful time. So I would say get a little taste of every tapas, not meal. Tapas, not meal. Try it all.
More to that point, Jackie, can you just talk maybe a little bit, what was sort of the genesis of you being selected for that international, was it in Japan where you had your picture taken with the Prime Minister and other youth leaders? How did that come about where you got selected to participate in that wonderful opportunity?
Yeah, that was through an organization called Global Vision. And basically what they do is they try to give university students experience in the private and public sector, sort of business, industry, and politics. And so, I mean, I haven't been in touch with the organization for a while, but not World Vision, Global Vision. It's a little bit different, but it sort of like a political group. I've never had a touch of politics before. I've never really had that experience, but at that particular event, we were at the G8 in the Deerhurst up north of Toronto, and our role was we had been trained by Department of Foreign Affairs on global trade techniques, and it sounds like kind of like we were spies. It was kind of crazy, but we weren't. We learned like what Canada's flagship industry and who our global trade partners. We were trained on how to do multilateral and bilateral trade negotiations, and then we were there to basically be a shadow summit of what the leaders were doing. At the time, they were working on nuclear nonproliferation, relevant, maternal health, food security, and the environment. And they were coming up with what their communique, what their proposal was to focus as G8 nations. And we were supposed to do the same as a youth summit. And it was kind of cool to see where we thought the focus should be versus, what the leaders would do. But it was just through, like, I stumbled upon an info session at the university, got involved, do a ton of volunteer time, and worked hard and got to be a part of it.
And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, I guess so.
Here's a great question from, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, from Leslie. Have you ever had an experience, Jackie, where you had to share maybe impacts or stresses of gender inequality with a male counterpart? And if so, what did you say or would you say to help create understanding in that situation?
I mean, yeah, like often. I'm very fortunate that now that I've been working with some of my colleagues for years, we have a pretty radically candid relationship with each other and all of us. And there's times, and generally I criticize in private, comment and praise in public, but criticize in private. But I've had a number of, there's a book, by the way, it's called Radical Candor. I recognize Crucial Conversations is another one. Like, one of the best books I've ever read, one of the best classes at university, which I didn't expect, was like how to have a tough conversation. It is like one of the skills that I think the best leaders around the world have, is having a tough conversation, getting right to the point, and leaving in a place of respect. So Radical Candor is a tool. It takes emotion out of it, but it's helped me deliver feedback, and it's helped me create a safe space for people to give me feedback, so we don't create echo chambers of ourselves. But yeah, I've had to have crucial conversations with people about, like, you can't trample her in a meeting. Like, she had a great point and I had to trample you to try to get her point across. Like, leave space for people in a meeting, listen, like, and sometimes I'll step in as like a chair not physically a chair, but like a meeting chair to say, sorry, did you have a comment? I thought you were trying to say something, and like actually create space in a meeting. There's so much, again, going back to the communication, there's so much of interaction happens in communication that it's a subtle thing, but it's a really important thing. I think even the way women feel safe at work is another thing, like be it, the activities you do or the social events you participate in, whatnot, women and non-binary, making sure that everyone feels like they have a place to not just work, but enjoy and socialize as well is an important thing.
There were two questions asked in succession, both about the same topic, and that's the word burnout. Jackie, you mentioned in your presentation, the blistering pace of your career, your work with Vendasta, mom to Weston and Weston's brothers, so a family of 4 here. How do you deal with burnout?
Yeah, burnout's a thing. I definitely burned after the fundraise was done, and I like shut it all down. I was like, I'm out. We're good. I am just taking time now. I took 2 solid weeks off. I didn't just unplug from, Slack. I know that sounds drastic, only 2 weeks, but like I took a screen off everything, kind of unplug, no TVs, no nothing, no social media. I find too that in my head, sometimes I would bucket social media and those types of things as play and as social. When I really peeled back, it was causing me anxiety and stress just as much. Well, I've got all these Facebook messages I haven't responded. Like, it's okay to just like rinse yourself of everything for a while. And I think sometimes we think that like, oh, but it's my friends. That contributes to burnout. So I took a big technology break for a while, and then I started prioritizing. COVID is tough on people because I'm definitely an extrovert and I miss human interaction. Like I miss sitting down and talking to people. I hate, here we are over Zoom. This is fantastic, by the way, but I started prioritizing phone calls over texts and tried to find ways to get human again, because I felt that the lack of human connection was contributing to my burnout. So something I'm looking forward to doing is like reintegrating sports into my life, because I find that for every hour of sports, I probably get another like 4 hours of just me feeling me again. So exercise and taking care of myself as well is another way that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent point, Jackie. It's like the where that human contact can be an outlet rather than a zapping our energy. It can build our energy. You made the comment about collisions, and that's what I've often said about university education, that it's comprised of classes and collisions. The classes, the curriculum in the classroom, and the collision in the hallway. In a pandemic world, it's been tougher. Those collisions don't exist, and that reduces a bit of our humanity, or quite a bit of our humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jackie, there was 2 really powerful images that you showed towards the end of your presentation. The one was the mom with the 2 children riding the subway with the bag behind her. The other was the new immigrant arriving, welcome to Canada. And so the question from Rakib is, any advice or observations you have for women in other parts of the world, like developing countries, that might face the similar challenges you face in reaching the point that you're at right now? So what advice to other women in other parts of the world about entrepreneurialism or simply becoming your best self?
Yeah, Ricky, that's a great question, and one I can only imagine. I've never experienced that. I can't even imagine. I'm not in a similar situation as those who are experiencing adversity in developing countries. So I don't have a solution. But what I do know is I think lately, and I think it's been accelerated by this whole great resignation and the switch of talent. And there's a lot of companies, Vendasta included, that are especially in technology, and I know I'm very siloed in one industry, but I think it's going to start to trickle into other industries as well, as talent and very strong talent it's tough to find. And a lot of companies are, I mean, we're sort of laggards in it, but we've got some fantastic people in India and in Brazil, and we've got people we've just hired in Kazakhstan, and and a lot of them are women, and they're coming here to Canada because they've got incredible talents and incredible skills, but they don't have the same opportunity as they have over in those nations as well. And so whether, that doesn't have to be the only path for a woman, but I think we're going to start to recognize with the shift in globalization of talent around the world, there's probably going to be runoff effects of people respecting and identifying women as like, no, these people are incredible. And if we don't recognize their strengths and talents here in these countries, other countries are going to start, and other companies in other countries are going to start to recognize them as well. So I don't have the answer, Ricky, but I'm keenly, one of our, the organizations we work closely with is the Open Door Society here in Saskatoon.
Mhm.
And we find time and time again, like work ethic and skills, they're just like over skilled when they come here as well. And it's just finding opportunity for them. And I think the opportunity is going to find them maybe faster than it has in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Jackie. Let's maybe pivot that question the other direction. Twice in your presentation, you talked about Silicon Prairie. So what's the secret to the success of Saskatoon? We think of Saskatoon being, the flatlands of Canada, so to speak. How does one emerge to create this silicon industry, which is quite prevalent in this area? So what do you think the source of that is?
I'm just riding on the success of the forefathers and mothers before me, because we've had a scene here for a while. It's just our time to be recognized, and we're starting to hit the success milestones that others in other jurisdictions have just been ahead of us by a couple of years. But someone recently said, it was like an investor call I jumped on, and they're like, "Oh, you're from Saskatoon, you're from the scheduling capital of the world." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, we've got 7 shifts, obviously a massive raise recently. They do restaurant scheduling, Coconut, they do scheduling for banks. We've got Ango scheduling for healthcare. A lot of the leading tech companies are also, and we just, acquired Calendar Hero scheduling for small businesses and niche professional verticals as well." So I think what happens is that it's almost like the BlackBerry effect, which is almost like a swear word now. I haven't been doing so well, but you have an early success, and then the talent finds new and creates all these collisions and these startups, and those startups grow into scale ups, and then you have more. And so it's just the time in our evolution that we're a few years behind, but we're right on the same trajectory. And I think there is something, I'm going to call it out because it's something that was shared with us during the IPO Roadshow, but it's prevalent across every company in Saskatchewan, is our work ethic and our grit. And like we call it our long winters, and we're just like, nose to the grind for 6 months, and then we're like, toodaloo, summer's here. But we can get to work, and we know how to ride the waves of positive luck and buckle down and ride the troughs and the valleys as well. So I think there's behind that.
I agree. So well said. Lisa asked a question about Vendasta in terms of your expansion plans. How's the company, it continues to expand, how do you maintain or maybe grow that culture so still every voice gets heard at the table?
Yeah, great question. This is an area where I'm spending a lot of my time right now as well, as just in leadership and organizational planning to what we're switching to. So first of all, there's how do we preserve and maintain and really evolve our culture as we take on companies with their own cultures. That's sort of an area that we're exploring right now, and that's part of our M&A strategy. And we're looking at what point do we need to integrate a company versus maintain what is successful and just create synergies between the two. So that's one. But as it relates to ensuring every voice gets heard, one of the things that we have adopted is, you're probably very familiar, OKRs, objectives and key results. And so what that effectively does across the company is it's ensured by every division, what are we focused on attaining? So if we want to get adoption of one product, or if we want to reduce gross dollar churn of another area of our business. It's very clear and measurable objectives that the company's measuring and aligning toward and focusing on in a given quarter. What that does by focusing on an outcome and not an output or a project or a tactic there is it allows for innovation right at the front lines, the people who are closest to the problems to suggest tactics. And what I mean by that is when we're fluid in how we do something, but laser focused on what we're trying to do, it creates a lot more innovation and flexibility in attaining that outcome. And that's where we see a lot of innovation. I still remember we had our sales teams that were trying to book presentations with new prospects, and we had like a brand new SDR, and she was like hitting her, like she was probably 60 days in the company. She was doing a fantastic job hitting her numbers. And so I sat down with her and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I have an idea. I want to present it at our OER meeting. And she was just jumping on, this was before COVID, but she was jumping on video calls with all of her prospects. She wasn't picking up the call, and she was like, hey, I thought we would, and that human interaction of just like talking to someone, which seems totally obvious now post-COVID, but she got everyone on a call and a demo as a result of creating a human connection. So anyways, long story short, I think it's about being rigid in your outcomes and highly dynamic in your tactics to get there, to allow people to suggest tactics and ideas that move the needle and experiment.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm glad we're recording that because that was a very insightful response. So thank you. I like the ability to be dynamic and laser focused. I think enables you to get the best of both worlds, so to speak, as you go forward. It's Anali or Inale, I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but when you began your time at the Edwards School of Business, what was your original passion? How did you find that? Did you think you'd have a career in tech, or were you, I guess, using your words, were you the wanderer? That was a word you used in your university career. So what was the original passion? How did you come into the Vendasta opportunity?
I was definitely a wanderer. I took a year to, I was like a camp counselor at a summer camp in New York, and then a nanny in Switzerland, and then I was just like all over the place. But that was the most, I shouldn't say this at the university, that was probably the most impactful year of my university career, but because it taught me all the things that I should learn that I didn't, all the unknown unknowns. It was like a rapid learning experience that everything I thought going into university changed coming out of that year and going home. What I mean, and the many startups that I founded as well. So when I got into university, I thought I was going to start a marketing agency. That was like I want to, now the irony, like full circle 10 years later, is that those are our customers, is like marketing agencies, and we provide a platform for those customers, which is pretty cool. But I stumbled upon tech. I've always been interested in tech. I think it was through just this technology, Next Canada, it's a technology accelerator. But what I discovered there was that, technology, it's not a sector anymore. Like technology is hitting all sectors, and I wanted to be a part of it and kind of go where the puck is heading, if you will. And so I, early on, through that accelerator, I learned that marketing is highly important and very important in tech right now, in demand gen and how you capture intent. But what I learned in that was I needed to know numbers, and I shied away from numbers, and I avoided numbers like the plague. And I use spreadsheets and math every single day now, way more than I use what I learned in marketing, which is like nothing against marketing. I use it a ton, but I was just shocked at how much I need to learn a good old spreadsheet. So yeah, that's how that's changed.
Well, if we were in person, I'd be giving you a standing ovation on that point alone. I've often said the Excel spreadsheet is humankind's greatest invention.
Yeah.
So
I would have not believed it, but I do.
Now, let's continue on that perspective of being a university student and finding your career. Aliyah asked a question about how do you balance life and university at the same time? So when you're a university student, you're playing Husky athletics for a year, you're involved in different clubs, you've got to take your classes, How do you balance all of those things while you're a university student itself?
Cheapers. So I don't know, I blacked out. I don't remember how I did it. What I do know is that I was not a straight A student. I definitely, I was the one in class, like I was working at an animation studio, like messaging my clients and like trying to listen to the it was bad. I don't recommend that because you're not getting your full experience. That was pre-trip and pre-startup. After I came back, I was like, holy cow, I don't know anything. And I need to soak all of this up because once you're gone and you're on your own. Like yes, there's books, but it's a structured learning path. How do you balance it all? There's no magic bullet. First of all, Aaliyah, I didn't have the same university experience as you do. COVID's been tough. Like I feel for the university students because it's a beautiful time in life to experience and meet people. And I'm so happy that we're returning back there because you need to experience university. Sometimes that might mean not getting straight A's, but taking it in. Your marks don't always reflect, I'm sorry, Dean Willoughby, your marks don't always reflect your experience. And there's some cases where getting to understand how to work with people through a group project and the working agreements and the nonverbal communication and delegation and the art of aligning around a common outcome might actually be more important than the mark you get on that group project. And so I would soak in all of the things that won't happen after university. Marks are going to come and go. Enjoy the experience, balance the experience.
Well said, Jackie, and trust me, no offense at all. We won't talk about what I got for my organizational behavior midterms in fall 1984 semester. I didn't make the curve, but luckily they curved the marks. I needed them.
Oof.
Here's a great question from Monica, and about a different perspective now in terms of entrepreneurship. So Monica, a mom with 3 boys, she's an Edwards grad student, international student. What advice for older women to be persistent in achieving success? And by the way, she says admiration, respect to you, Jackie, as part of her comment.
Well, thank you, Monica. Admiration with 3 boys. I've got 2, and just to think about having one more is, whoo, good for you. Challenges women face for older women. That I think what I experienced, even in the short time I took off after with both boys, is that I felt irrelevant. I felt that I had missed a lot, and that I shouldn't insert my opinion as much, and I wasn't gone for very long. So for women who have been out of the workforce for some time, I can only imagine it's tough to build your confidence. It's less about what you know and what you feel you know is really what stares at you. So I mean, it's not the same advice, because hustle harder when you have 3 kids. You're probably burning all cylinders already. I would just lean on, like in our business, I don't know if it's the same as every business, but the advice that I give my teams is get close to the customer. Like at the end of the day, when in doubt, get closest to the customer, because your insights are going to be the most valuable when you have ideas to share that are relevant to, at the end of the day, who's driving your business. Now, that's not always relevant if you're in admin roles or operations roles or whatnot. That would be for those who aren't in those to get close to the customer. But I would say, like, so much of your worst critic is going to be you. And there's only so much you can give of yourself, but you have to kind of recognize that you deserve to be there more than just as much as everyone else. Just because you took time off, business moves at the speed of light. So what was potentially very relevant 5 years ago, cool that you have that knowledge, but not as relevant at the way, especially over the last couple of years, things have been moving now. So as long as you're in tune with the here and the now and what customers are, I would say that's how you build up your own confidence to feel like you deserve.
Here's another perspective, Jackie. You had the question in terms of somebody who's in university, has an undergrad student balancing life and university. Monica's question about being a mom with graduate student mom with 3 boys, international, and the focus there. Here's a question from Marmar about somebody now who's just finished university. So besides the B.Comm or whatever degree one has, are there any other skills or certifications that a person could get that would enable them to be successful in their career?
Yeah, well, I mean, and depending on what you want to do, I don't want to stray everyone into this technology vortex. Like in our industry, yes, technical skills are, I wish I would have. Here's one thing I wish I would have taken in school. First of all, stats. What? Stats? Like stats is what I use constantly. And I barely snuck by in that class. Like Nancy Lee gave me a grace mark. I don't know. But now stats is like my world, is looking at like how customer adoption trends are and if we could move, anyways. So those are the things that like business decision making and data. I wish if I were to go and part of the dream is to take a sabbatical, when's that gonna happen? But to drop out and literally re-enroll at the U of S in our data science or some type of statistics or analytics type of program, because it's so crucial for decision making and understanding data and forming strategy decisions. So I would definitely recommend something around data or stats. If you're interested in marketing, 100% you got to know what the major marketing platforms are doing, and you have to be able to speak the language. If it's Google, you absolutely have to understand just search engine marketing performance on PPC and what the value of a keyword is, for sure. Facebook, same thing. It's more about audience and stuff like that. There's a ton of literature and reading, but getting into the technical, everyone wants the job, but no one wants to do the work. Like if you show that you know how to do the work, you'll get the job.
You've made our stats professor very happy on this call, Carolyn, who teaches several hundred students per year, first and second year stats. So she said stats for the win. Here's another question from one of your former professors, Natalie, who may have taught you accounting.
No way, yes.
She's mentioning here, how can women who are doing well in their careers, such as you, best support those who are just starting?
Absolutely. Oh, I'd love to turn it right back to you, Natalie. I'm trying to figure that as well. One of the things we launched recently at Vendasta is our mentorship program. And I can tell you honestly, I'm getting just as much out of the program as our mentees are, hands down. Like it's like the old ad, it's lonely at the top. Sometimes you're just like in this echo chamber of your own peers. And until you have these forcing functions to like really meaningfully develop relationships with people and get to know their stories and their backgrounds at all, you won't ever really develop true empathy, not just from a work perspective, but from a life perspective as well. So I'm a huge advocate. Again, my presentation was going to be about the 10 women that shaped my life, and like I can attribute a piece of every success I have today or some belief that I share today back to one of those women. And I think that's how we get to a place of equality and diversity, is allowing young women and young people in general to see themselves in the places that they maybe don't see themselves in today. Yes, I can be the COO of it. Yes, I can be a female coach of a professional sports team. Yes, there's so much, and until we have those trailblazers, it's always going to be an uphill battle until we get to the Saskatchewan flat territory where it's just easy for everyone.
Jackie, I want to be respectful of your time and your sacrifice today. So I'll go with one more question here from Isabel. This is an interesting one. Advice you would give on differentiating yourself. Suppose you don't have a big diverse work experience. How can you still differentiate yourself, applying for positions or else really doing the hustle harder perspective?
Yeah, so after a certain time period, people are going to start to look for depth in career. But for a student entering the co-op program who hasn't really started their program, I want to look at breadth, but I don't want to look at squirrel syndrome. I don't know how to describe that in a technical term, but you want to make sure that people are doing things and contributing and it could be anything. It doesn't need, like, what I look for in early career folks is those that have passion, interest, and who accomplish things. So it could be in like Girl Scouts. I held a fundraising campaign and we did X, Y, and Z, and the ability to articulate accomplishments, not just I answered emails and then I went to a bunch of meetings and I worked with a bunch of people and like, cool, but what did you do? Like, what did you do? And it doesn't need to be a heroic act of anything, but the ability to, sometimes with my team, when I was working with a younger, more inexperienced team on like, how do I shape my goals? I told them, write your resume, like write out, at Vendasta, I did X, Y, and Z. Give the headline in advance of a year from now what you want to be, and just work towards that. And if we think in terms of accomplishments and really outcomes, it's an outcome focus, same thing that we're adopting across the org, we can be rigid in our tactics, but we can really be clear on what value we're bringing to an organization, or not profit organization, or a for-profit organization, or a community club. So Isabel, I would say, think in terms of what outcomes you're driving, what outcomes you have driven, or what outcomes you want to drive. And with some of the new programs, even if you say like, I want to do these things, they're going to say like, oh, she's got an appetite to take on and be a builder. And I think you'll go places as a result.
Well said, Jackie. Thank you very much on behalf of the Edwards School of Business, faculty, staff, and students, alumni, parents, industry leaders, university leaders who joined us. You'd mentioned in your presentation that you were going to talk about 10 women who influenced your life. You are today one woman who influenced a few hundred through the comments that you provided. So thank you for pivoting your remarks to, I think, have such a platform for, and you've seen the questions, Jackie, from new students, from recent alumni, from students considering the Edwards School of Business, from people who want to pivot their career later on, demonstrates the impact and the reach, to both the breadth and depth of your comments. So on behalf of the business school, Jackie, we thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege. And thank you for being patient with me and all this vulnerability. And I'm reading all my direct messages. I'll respond to like, wow, you've got some incredible people on here as well. So thank you.
Well, Jackie, we wish you very well. Carly, thank you for organizing today's material. Everyone, have a wonderful day. Stay well. Jackie, thank you again for representing Women in Leadership events so very well today on March the 8th.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Jackie.